I think even their success is debatable. So the pattern here is something spawning imitators, and through such becomes stale and there is little variation. Now let's look at Pokemon-dedicated YouTubers, like John Carlo Perrymango11 and his Kanto University channel, which features videos made by other people such as Hoodlums Grafty, Tyranitar and Shofu, to name a few, alongside other channels like the J-Wits, Pro Victini, The One Integral, Tamashi Hiroka, Purple Rodri, and Munching Orange, as well as many others I couldn't possibly list. And I'm not talking smack about these people, by the way. They all make good content in their own right. But think about this. What is the real difference between what any of these guys produce? They all host a lot of Let's Plays, news updates, maybe some videos discussing trivia about the games or fan theories. Deviating from that is an exception and not the rule for these channels. Because of this, I predict that Pokemon-dedicated YouTube channels will fall. People won't view them as often, and at best the trend will be limited to a few avenues of creation, like angry review shows have. At worst, it could be chased off by negative reception everywhere it appears for a long time, and memes dedicated to the trend's demise will appear. This is because it will be cliché. It will be done so much to so many people that there will be a glut of people who are just bored with it and don't want to see it anymore. Now, I've always said that just because something is repetitive, that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. What is and isn't stale for a person will vary too much for anyone to make a good recommendation for or against a certain piece of media, just based on how repetitive it is. There is a problem, though, when something goes collectively stale or cliché. Pokemon Let's Plays in general will not go away. At least that's not what I predict. The games are probably going to be popular for a long time, even if they're repetitive, and as long as it's popular and YouTube videos are popular, people commenting about Pokemon will be popular. But you don't always see channels dedicated to popular franchises like you do with Pokemon. I don't see many Mario-only channels, maybe a couple Zelda-only channels. Similar situations seem to have happened with COD and Minecraft. But not even with uber-popular franchises like Super Smash Bros. Has this guaranteed to happen. My only guess, by the way, as to why this has happened with these franchises as opposed to others, is because they're accessible to both casual and hardcore players, where people can get a lot of information, either from the single-player or multiplayer in Pokemon and Call of Duty's cases, while still being mainstream and popular enough to get them lots of views. Also, I don't think a single series will get as stale as a genre can. People who see many games in a certain genre can get collectively sick of them and cause a crash, a dead fad. While there are always people who play Pokemon, get tired of it, move on to something else, and feel like going back, when you have many franchises doing the same thing, you can't play every single one, so content creators might go out of business en masse. Now what really kicked this off in my mind? Well, recently, The One Integral made a video about how, even though he's gaining subscribers, his view counts are going down, and he's asking commenters to tell him how to improve his channel. He's the one who does a series of videos, by the way, called Pokemon Origins, where he gives video bios of various Pokemon. Even though that might not sound too useful of a video, I find them strangely enjoyable, and it seems he's tapped into a market of people who are into that sort of thing. I'm worried this might be something similar to an economic bubble, though. People are valuing his channel highly enough to subscribe, but now that on Pokemon Origins he's doing less popular Pokemon, people aren't watching the original series, and people aren't watching his more formulaic videos. I think what's happening is that the people don't value the videos as much, and are doing it because it's the trend. Now, some might wonder, how come this was able to happen with this trend and not others? Because when almost anything gets popular, it will spawn a lot of imitators. But here is a case where the imitators are actually getting popular and getting good reception. If you create a channel dedicated to Pokemon, you don't need to really be that different. You follow a formula and people will flock to them if you do Nuzlocks, walkthroughs, trivia, and the like. And a ton of channels can do this. I want to contrast this to a situation on YouTube where the imitators have not had good reception. You see, I once thought that we wouldn't see Let's Plays much anymore. I know Slowbeef and Diabetes, for instance, think that people like PewDiePie and Tobuscus would lead to a downfall, but one day I realized that 2 years ago, I was actually thinking the exact same thing, that Let's Plays would be gone by now, and even though certain issues with the practice have persisted, Let's Plays are alive and well. Now, even though you have a ton of channels out putting Let's Plays, this has more to do with how easy it is to produce them, and not because people will view it and give it good reception, just if you follow some simple guidelines. And there is a lot of variation in popular Let's Players. I can list individual qualities of some of them. For instance, Nintendo Capri Sun likes to tie in personal stories and experiences into the games he plays. Jugga Conroy tries to be informative in addition to making and quoting a lot of memes. Proton John and Josh Jepson are kind of good at being jerkish if they need to. Slow Beef and Diabetes, despite the riffs of the LPs they do on the Retro Prey account, funnily enough, seem to have something of a reverence for Let's Plays, and their riffs and the way they talk about Let's Plays seem more like trying to show off how Let's Plays need to be fixed and that people are misusing it, rather than the idea being an intrinsically a bad one, which is how their charm comes out. With normal Let's Plays, some people like Slow Beef and Diabetes again are into Let's Plays that are strictly about the game and don't deviate from that subject, usually lambasting an LP where the creator talks about themselves. And though I can understand why they like those, it's not what I'm into, actually. If I'm watching an LP of a game, chances are I know everything about it already, and I watch more of the personality of the commentators rather than strictly just being about the game. And if their commentary doesn't deviate somewhat from being strictly this game, I quickly lose interest myself. The bare minimum for me is just people who talk about the opinions of a game. I honestly have a hard time saying the same thing about Let's Plays on channels dedicated to Pokemon specifically. If your channel is dedicated to Pokemon, there are different expectations for a person who does that than for a person who does a Pokemon LP in a channel not strictly meant for that. If you run a Pokemon channel, you really can't make a Let's Play that doesn't have sidebars, talks about opinions on the game, and usually wants to list the Pokemon found on the route and enemy bios. Because of this, LPs from a Pokemon dedicated channel don't feel the same to me as Pokemon LPs from a channel not dedicated to Pokemon. LPs by Pokemon dedicated channels have always felt kinda samey to me. Now, I'm going to talk about some people I know on YouTube, so sorry if it sounds like I'm marketing for them, but only one I can think of as of the writing of this video is strictly dedicated to Pokemon. That will be Bartochomi, and even he is still a bit new, hasn't put out videos in a while, so his style is still very changeable in his stage. So because of that, I think he'll branch out at some point if Pokemon channels start to lose their steam. And by the way, if you're watching this Bartochomi, if you haven't guessed, that is what I recommend you do. You still have a lifeboat, so if you see a ship sinking, get away as quickly as possible. Now, aside from